The Darkness. Tales from a Revolution, Maine. Written by Lars Hedbor. Narrated by Shamaan Casey. Dedication. To Mom and Dad, for encouraging me to look up to the skies and back into our past in order to understand our world. Chapter 1. A shadow passed over George Williams' closed eyes, and he frowned, looking to see what had interrupted him as he dozed in the warm springtime sun. He scrambled to his feet when he saw that it was his father, wearing a stern look on his face. "Polly-Ann needs you," he said, and turned to leave. Stopping, he added over his shoulder, "If you were done picking stone, there was work elsewhere. Naps are for children." George's face burned as he followed his father back toward the barn where Polly-Ann waited for her milking. Although he knew that there was always work elsewhere on the family's hard-scrabble farm, it seemed to him that there was also time, on a rare occasion, for a short break from ceaseless labor. As they crested the ridge that marked the high point along the saddle of the island that had always been home to him, George skipped his customary pause to enjoy the view, instead focusing on keeping up with the solid form of his father's strong back. As usual, he could feel his father's disappointment and frustration as an almost physical presence. He knew that it was not all about his personal failings. Just days ago he had again overheard his father describing a litany of his complaints with their situation in a late-night discussion with his mother. "We came from Connecticut chasing the promise of good, fertile land, but it produces more stone than crops. We've suffered ill enough weather where we were, but one more season like this last winter, and we'll join the Etheridges in cold graves. Colonel Campbell sits in his fort and issues commands which we must obey or be branded as rebels. We are denied the society of our westward friends and forced to swear oaths to the king. We could scarcely buy anything, and barely raise enough to feed ourselves and the boys. And George, well, he's trying." George had cringed under his blanket at the mention of his name, but his mother interrupted his father's tirade. "Shubel, I know it's harder than we'd hoped, but we will persevere, and when this war has reached some sort of happy conclusion, we will be well prepared to make our advantage from the restoration of peace." She'd sighed and added, "George has always taken after me more than his brothers do, both in his appearance and in his attitude. Sometimes I wonder that you put up with me when you rail against his faults so." "Helen, your industry knows no limits, but George hardly knows the word. He does no more than he is asked, and scarcely that, if I don't oversee him as though he were an Irish indenture." He snorted then. "What though we could indenture an Irishman, but that is likely an institution that only my mother's generation will know." George could not make out his mother's reply, but only her gentle, mollifying tone, with a final discontented rumble from his father before they both quieted and the household drifted into the peace of slumber. Following his father now, walking briskly to keep up, George could not help but remember that the stern man ahead of him would be happy to replace him with a stranger from across the sea, only for the greater industry he would enjoy. Scowling, he pictured this theoretical Irishman, whose speech he knew would be impenetrable to civilized ears, whose hair would be either a dense mop of wiry black, or else an even more absurd mass of carrot-shaded grease. And if his father thought that he ate prodigious quantities of potatoes, why, he'd never seen an Irishman tuck in, leaving naught for anyone else at the table. So lost was he in his growing distaste for a person he had never met, George did not see his father stop until he practically run into the man. "Did you not hear me, George?" "Nay, I was thinking." His father scowled in disapproval at such a fruitless pursuit and repeated himself. "When you're done tending to Polly-Ann, bring in the rest of the herd for the evening." I shall, father." "See you do." With that, his father turned toward the house and stomped back inside. George trudged toward the barn, hoping that he might find a moment's respite there as he fed and milked the cow. As he entered the dim coolness, though, he
Sample complete. Ready to continue?